Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag-and-drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to The Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
In just a matter of seconds, you're going to hear a classic episode of this show from back in the day when we called ourselves Movies We Like.
It took us a while to settle into the show's format, so you'll notice some differences as you listen to these episodes. For instance, it takes us a bit of time to actually get into the conversation about the movie. Things like that.
But we're still proud of the conversations about the movies themselves, and we think they're worth keeping in the library.
So enjoy these episodes from our back catalog. And you can become part of our Discord community, learn more about the show, and find out how you can become a supporting member at thenextreel.com.
So thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to The Next Reel. We appreciate your time and attention, and we hope you enjoy the show. Are you even shooting? You know what that's from?
No.
Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man. Remember that? Classic?
I remember hearing about it.
Classic.
Is that on your guilty pleasures list?
And so, you know what? That may even be too guilty to be on my guilty pleasure list. That Harley Davidson and the Marlboro is guiltier than Under the Cherry Moon. How do you feel about that?
Wow.
Yeah. Yipper do.
So it's more like an S&M movie. There's no pleasure you get out of it. It's actual pain, but you just can't stop.
There was a YouTube video. I think it's from Cineflix. Put it out. It was what was it this week? It was the top 10. It was top 10 most offensive films ever.
Missed that.
It really?
I did.
It was offensive films. I'm googling it because it's top 10 most controversial movies.
Okay.
Yeah, and most of them were reasonably predictable.
Obvious.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of feel like that. But there were a couple that I didn't that I haven't seen. And actually most of them I haven't seen, but there were films like Brown Bunny. Have you ever heard of Brown Bunny?
Yeah, that's what's his name's film? The guy who had
It's another one of those in the realm of the senses that's offensive strictly because it's real sex. It's like porn.
Yeah, it's Vincent Gallo. That was playing that was when I was at AFM back in 2004 or 3. That was one of the movies that was there. And
I thought of you as I was watching this video celebrating the top 10 most offensive movies because one of them I know is your favorite, which is the Human Centipede.
Oh, super favorite.
Yeah, I know that's at the top of your just all-time favorites list.
It is.
That's awful. It's really awful. People do a lot of really horrible things on film.
Yes, there are.
There's a wide range. We were called out over on the Facebook by the talented Noel, who has been listening to us. He's been binge listening to us, which is always a treat. I love it. I love hearing that, first of all.
It's always fun. It's always fun.
Yeah.
Yes, Noel called us out about the Sunshine episode back in our original sci-fi series, saying, I never made the connection to Heart of Darkness before. Found it interesting that you were categorizing it under original sci-fi, as you pointed out the connection to a piece of literature. Always had difficulty with Mark Strong's character, and I think you nailed that issue well, which I thank you, Noel.
Yes, thank you very much.
But yes, and then I commented about that whole original sci-fi thing, saying I still think that it's fair to call it original sci-fi because, I mean, really, it is kind of its own story. It never anywhere claims to be based on Heart of Darkness. I think that Danny Boyle said it was an influence. I don't think they ever kind of were trying to kind of do a rewrite of Heart of Darkness in space. So I think it's fair to say that it was a strong influence, but I still think that it does fit under original sci-fi.
I do too, and I think being influenced by is one thing, but this is a concept and a setting that still feels very original to me.
Yes, I agree.
I agree with that.
But thanks for the comment, Noel.
Yeah,
we definitely appreciate it.
Appreciate that. That's fantastic. I'm liking that Flick Charge guy. I don't participate a whole lot, but I do love I read just about everything.
Yeah, lots of great stuff on there. And you know where else I'd love to read more comments?
Where?
Over on iTunes.
Oh, Andy.
I know. Call me greedy.
You're a sweetheart.
A greedy sweetheart.
Greedy sweetheart. Why would you like to do that? Why is that important to you?
It's a great place to show love, for people to contact us, let us know what they think of the show, about specific episodes or about the show in general. And they can also rate us as well as review us. And all of that helps other people find the show.
We also had some wonderful comments over on the blog from the one and the only Ben Lott at The Blot Spot.
Indeed. I think this was I think we both had some love on this one. He agreed with me about the score being very effective, and also the camera work and the title sequence.
Well, which movie you're talking about? Because we got two from him.
Oh, sorry. This is Seconds.
Yes.
Seconds,
all
yes.
Right.
And then he also agreed with you in the fact that he didn't enjoy the film itself.
See, I call that the overall win, right? The costumes were great, but really the movie was a piece of crap. Right?
I'm not...
What I loved when he writes at the end, where I agreed with the Amazon review. I said in my own review, that this felt like an extended Twilight Zone episode. Trim it way down, and it could really work.
That was pretty funny.
But what's best? Our rank of this thing was 157 out of 188, and his rank was 160 out of 188. That's another one that's pretty darn close.
Yes, we're not quite at it's not quite time to match up again on our rankings.
No, not yet. But he was also catching up on some other films. He did he joined us for the Jurassic World.
Right, which he was on my side with that one, which was great. Tommy and I loved the movie despite all of its shortcomings, and he was totally on board with that. So glad to hear it, Ben. A great point that you made, as you said to your wife, that was remarkable. I never thought they could make me cheer for the T-Rex and Raptors. They're supposed to be the bad guys. I think that's a brilliant point, that we've got those bad creatures there that have been the antagonists in previous films, and here they are helping our protagonists out in this one. So, yeah, very fun movie.
Very fun movie. All right. Shall we tell the people where we're from today?
Where are we from, Pete?
Hey, everybody. This is The Next Reel. My name is Pete Wright, and that there is Andy Nelson.
Hello, hello.
And we spoil the movies. Tonight on the show, the first in our series of the great films of 1939 with Victor Fleming's film Gone with the Wind. Before we get into that, you should learn more about us at thenextreel.com. Subscribe on iTunes or follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Next Reel. And you know what? All seriousness, go play the Instagram hashtag Pony Prize, hashtag Guess the Movie Challenge, because all the cool kids are doing it. And we are all about peer pressure. Andy, how are the cool kids doing this week?
The cool kids did pretty well this week. It was, I was actually leading the charge this week, as good old Stephen Smart, who usually runs it, was out on a work trip. So
he's in a very, very complicated spelling location. Yes, complicated place to spell.
Yes, and it doesn't sound like the way that it's spelled.
No, it looks like Ragnarok. That's not right.
Oh, no, it's not Ragnarok.
That is not a place in Europe.
It's not. But we did, this week was The Fall, was Tarsem Singh's very visually interesting film, The Fall, which I just watched recently, and I thought it was perfectly suited for playing this game because it's just amazing visuals from beginning to end in this film. And it's one of those films that I don't think it had very good reviews, but it kind of had me under its spell. And so who knows, down the road, I may end up calling this a guilty pleasure. I don't know. But pretty interesting film to watch. And 3 images in, our what did you call them? The cool kids?
Mm-hmm.
They were able to figure it out. And it was N. Bergloff who was able to figure out that it was, in fact, The Fall.
Congratulations to N. Bergloff. Now, that's a new person. That's a new name.
It is a new person. And I believe he is in the same circles, or at least kind of the same part of the world as Glarsid and those folks.
Awesome.
Yes. The
growing Swedish influence.
I tell you. They are coming.
That's not what they sound like. That is not at all what they sound like. That was not. That was a malevolent Star Trek accent is what that was.
So, totally wrong road. Totally wrong road. Yep.
All right.
But anyway, congratulations, N. Bergloff. You're entered to win the 2015 Pony Prize.
There you go. Let's do trailers.
I am very excited about this, and I'll tell you why, Pete. It's Sicario is the name of the film.
Sicario.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You know why I'm excited?
Why are you excited about Sicario?
I'm excited about this because it is the next film by the director Denis Villeneuve, who we have talked about on this show before. He did Prisoners, he did Incendie, he did Enemy, which is a very trippy film. Sicario looks along the lines of kind of just a border thriller sort of film. We've got, I guess Sicario in Mexico means hitman, and the IMDb description here says, in the lawless border area stretching between the U.S. and Mexico, an idealistic FBI agent is enlisted by an elite government task force official to aid in the escalating war against drugs. Led by an enigmatic consultant with a questionable past, the team sets out on a clandestine journey, forcing Kate to question everything that she believes in order to survive. Kate is played by Emily Blunt, who looks like she's continuing in her action kick-butt role type that she started with the wonderful film Edge of Tomorrow, horribly named. But she's back in action again. We've got Josh Brolin in it, John Bernthal is in it, and of course Benicio del Toro, who looks just absolutely wonderful in this film. It just looks like just a great cast and great director. I'm quite excited about this.
I can't believe you didn't say the cast member I'm most excited about.
Who's that?
Jeffrey Donovan, man.
Oh,
we just talked about him last week with Extinction.
That's right.
And how excited I am about seeing him in movies, and I didn't even see this one coming.
That is so funny.
In fact,
that's right.
Did I say Sicario? Oh, I don't know what that is.
I don't think you said that.
I didn't mention that when I was looking at his other films.
You started with Burn Notice and went down.
Because I do love Burn Notice.
Yes.
The other one I adore as an actor is the great Victor Garber.
Oh, yes.
I find him fantastic.
He will perpetually be in my head as the designer of the Titanic.
Yeah, I know. But he has been in so much other wonderful stuff. And, he is actually coming back to TV. Of course, he's on television right now. I don't know if he's in this series in this coming season, but he is one part of the, what's his name? Firestorm in The Flash. I think it's Firestorm. Right. Anyway, he plays Dr. Martin Stein. I think he is moving from The Flash over to the spin-off series Legends of Tomorrow. And so that should be really interesting.
And he's also in Selfless, the Tarsem Singh sort of remake of Seconds.
Yes, which this is the Ryan Reynolds, Ben Kingsley.
Or Gandhi.
If you like Gandhi, you'll love Selfless. So the circle takes the square on that one. Very excited about it. All right. Yes. When does it come out? Did you say already?
I didn't. It comes out September 18th.
All right. September 18th. All right. So my movie. I file this under just what the hell happened? That this movie got made. This is one of those somebody took an 18-sided die of actors and rolled them to see who would end up on screen together. And in this case, it's Jackie Chan, John Cusack, and Adrian Brody. Adrian Brody, it is a fight for the Silk Road when East and West collide. Corrupt Roman leader Tiberius, played by Brody, arrives with a giant army to claim the Silk Road. Huo-an, Jackie Chan, and his group of trained warriors teams up with an elite legion of defected Roman soldiers led by Lucius, John Cusack, to maintain the delicate balance of power in the region. So it is very much a period piece. I don't know what kind of look they're going for. It seems like a strange... it seems sort of beautiful and yet not quite with the visual voice of something like 300. But they're definitely going for some bigger set pieces, lots of people, and apparently it has been wildly successful in China, as it is already apparently has already been out since February, but it doesn't hit us until September 4th. What'd you think? Crazy?
Yes, it looks crazy. Adrian Brody looks crazy, but this strikes me as the kind of the current trend of really capitalizing on what you can do in the Chinese film market. I believe that China only lets in 20 films a year that are non-Chinese produced in some sort. So that's a very small margin. So tapping into a huge box office market like China, there's going to be a lot of these sorts of co-productions or films. I don't know if this was completely produced in China, although it does say a massive success this year in its native China.
Right.
Makes me think that it was a Chinese film first with these American actors. And so I feel like this is kind of an interesting direction where things are going to be going.
I think so too. So I am strangely looking forward to it. You know, we've talked about what strange things have become of Adrian Brody, but I do this John Cusack very much, and of course Jackie Chan.
Always fun to watch.
Always fun to watch Jackie Chan. So it's interesting to see what happens to Jackie Chan as he continues to age, because there were a lot of years where he was not like aging at a pace of humans. And I think he's slowing down a little bit, and it's fun to see kind of what he comes up with as he slows down. So
exactly.
Unbelievable talent. So there you go, Dragon Blade, September 4th, 2015. Excellent. That's pretty much what I got.
Pete?
Yeah?
I don't think I will kiss you, although you need kissing badly. That's what's wrong with you. You should be kissed, and often by someone who knows how.
Gone with the Wind has captured the imagination and acclaim of the entire world. The screen has never known a love story to compare with this. When Rhett Butler meets Scarlett O'Hara.
I love you more than I've ever loved any woman. And I've waited longer for you than I've ever waited for any woman.
Let me alone.
Kiss me once.
Can't we ever forget that day at 12 Oaks?
Do you think I could ever forget it? Have you forgotten it? Can you honestly say you don't love me?
No, I don't love you.
It's a lie.
Well, even if it is a lie, do you think I'd go off and leave Melanie and the baby?
I'm not cornered. And you'll never corner me, Rhett Butler, or frighten me. You've lived in dirt so long you can't understand anything else. And you're jealous of something you can't understand.
A love affair you'll remember as long as you live, filled with all the fire and fury of the times in which it happened. Gone with the Wind. First picture to win 10 Academy Awards. The most honored, the most talked about motion picture in all film history.
Gone with the Wind, Andy, 1939. We're starting off with what a timely film.
I don't think we could have picked a better time to discuss this film.
Oh my goodness. This film was, I think it was difficult to get this film made for a number of reasons, but which I'm sure we will talk about. But that goes to the number of people who are involved in its creation, just in terms of the credited and uncredited talent behind it. Victor Fleming, credited as the director, uncredited George Cukor and Sam Wood. Writing credits, obviously based on the book by Margaret Mitchell, which was of the time. Original screenplay by Sidney Howard, with other hands in it from Oliver Garrett, Ben Hecht, Joe Swerling, and John Van Druten. That does not to discount David O. Selznick, who also had his fingers heavily in this film. Stars Vivien Leigh as Scarlett O'Hara, and of course Clark Gable as Rhett Butler.
To name a few.
To name just two of like 10,000 people who were in this film. How did it hold up for you on this viewing? And I have really been struggling with how to talk about this movie, Andy. So I sort of feel like we need to start with that. Because this movie celebrates and is so wildly tone deaf to so many of the social issues, which frankly they should have been less tone deaf about even at the time. It is wildly dated and a challenge to watch in that light for me. So what is your sense of how you approach watching this film?
Yes, I agree with you completely. It's a very challenging film to watch. I do like this film. I quite enjoy it. I find it a very interesting story. I really enjoy the characters in it. I enjoy all the things that it's saying outside of the issues that we're going to talk about here shortly. But I like that there's this element of this self-reliant woman. There's this look at love and kind of just the way that love works, and this fickle nature of it, and this jealousy and the rivalry and this importance of land. I think there's a lot of really interesting things going on in the story. It is a very long movie. I mean, it's a solid 4 hours pretty much when you have the overture and the intermission and the end music and all that sort of stuff. I mean, it's definitely a hefty thing to sit down and watch. And this time it took me a little bit to get into it. I find myself, well, I shouldn't say that. It's pretty easy to get into it. Then I hit the middle, and it takes a little longer for me to kind of get through the whole middle part. And then I really get into it again in the ending, and I really get drawn into the characters to the point where I'm really kind of touched by some of the things that are happening toward the end of the story. It really does work on that level. But it's hard in today's age to not look at everything else that's going on in this film and just be cognizant of how wildly inappropriate some of it is, and kind of just painful to watch a lot of that. And it's one of those films that I find myself watching and just kind of balancing that line of watching it as as somebody just enjoying those elements of the story with all of the things that it's just like, gosh, it's hard to watch that now. And I always find it interesting. One of the things that I always start thinking about is the studios that release these movies, that continue to release them despite some of the downfalls of them now, like this, or Peter Pan, that the Disney film, which has some horribly racist Native American stereotypes. And I find it interesting when films like Song of the South are the ones that are talked about, or Birth of the Nation, that, oh, well, you can't watch that. That's a film to look at, maybe, and just to analyze kind of what it's about, but you don't want to actually go and watch it and enjoy it. But then there are these films that are so widely praised, like this and Peter Pan, that people just kind of tend to gloss over that stuff. And it's such a strange thing that kind of bothers me.
I totally agree with you. I think that, for me, got in the way of watching this film this time. My experience with the film was, this how do we laud this film because of what it is? We cannot truly let appreciation for the fantasy that is Gone with the Wind get in the way of what the film is actually doing, which is glossing over a history, trying to repaint history as something that that is so far from what we know to be the truth. But part of what this film is for me is it is a work of art, and as we were talking about the 10 most controversial films, that we were talking about at the beginning of the show, I sort of feel like this film fits in with that. It doesn't have any overt sexuality. It doesn't have any human centipedes in it, as far as I could tell. Maybe that was during the overture, and I was fast forwarding through it. But what this film represents is a celebration of the lost cause movement of the South, and it is this romanticization. What's the word?
I think that's it. Romanticization.
Romanticization. Too many sounds. Romanticization of this the fable, and if we look at it as a fable, and are somehow able to move past the fact that it is completely racially tone deaf. The foundation of the film is built on something that you have to discount. And if you can just appreciate it for the colors and the art and the fact that it's a 4-hour bit of visual beauty, then I think maybe you can start to have a conversation about it. I don't like the film. I don't like how it makes me feel when I'm watching it, because I am so aware of what it does culturally, of what it's hiding, and what it purports to do to people who haven't who don't know what was going on, or choose to believe that this romantic view is history of the South. And so that I find really frustrating to watch. But at the time, right? I mean, we're dealing with 1939 or the 30s. We're dealing with, we're in a war footing, and Hollywood had this romantic notion that they were to celebrate and help people forget how hard it is. How hard it is moving through the Depression, how hard it is dealing with the war, how hard it is living in this country at the time, and that was that seems to have been sort of a cultural duty. And this film is as escapist as you can get.
Yeah, it definitely was very escapist, and I mean, it's this was done in a period of time when there were probably still people from the Civil War who were alive. It wasn't that far set from then, and I guess 60 years, right?
Yeah.
40, 60, or 80 years maybe. So, they'd be awfully old. But, there were some people, I'm guessing, that were still around. It was much fresher in their minds.
Certainly generationally. We're certainly looking at, kids of the Civil War, that first generation of post-Civil War families. Was
people who heard the stories
firsthand.
And everything. And Margaret Mitchell, who, I believe that she used some of the stories from, her grandmother or something. I didn't dig too much into Margaret Mitchell and her foundation as far as where she kind of got the story from and all that. But I believe that was the case, where she pulled some of it from family history, which, makes sense. She's from the South. Those people were there. She was telling a story that was very much kind of, like you said, kind of escapist, romantic entertainment is really kind of what it was. And I think in that sense, and I think that's what I do find myself drawn to in the story. If I can kind of look past the slavery elements, if I can look past the elements that deal with just the nature of what this whole, like you said, the lost cause narrative, this this struggle against this government trying to change these people. If you can kind of forget like what that struggle was actually about, and just look at it as like this is a civilization that's dying, and these are people who are going through a change. And I did find it really interesting watching Scarlett, who's I regardless of the film, I find her a riveting character because she is so unlikable, but she's so just watchable. There's something about her that I was just drawn to, and I really enjoy that type of character who has to go through a big change over the course of the story. And so that helps me get through this film. And I loved Rhett Butler. I think he had a very interesting take on things, and the wisdom that he had, and just the way that he approached everything. So, there are elements. But then, you go back to this thing where, they're going off to a quote-unquote political meeting, which means that they're really going to go put on their KKK robes and go burn this little shanty town where all these African Americans live, and kill everybody because they attacked Scarlett when she rode through. I guess that's how it happens in the book, and in the film it's awfully toned down quite a bit. But when you realize that that's what they're doing, it makes it so hard to like these people.
Yeah, it's funny. I have been comparing this film in some respects to Das Boot. It's this. What is our ability to turn the losing side of the narrative into our hero, and to make us feel something, for these people. And Das Boot, in this case, is how elegant is that that we walk away from Das Boot having felt felt a positive sense of just sort of faith and following of these Nazi characters, right? These Nazi soldiers. And yet I walk away from this film, from Gone with the Wind, feeling like, well, they tried. And I still, the very last line, as the door closes, I still walk away thinking, well, the moral of that story, kids, is that sometimes bad things do happen to bad people repeatedly. Right? Like, I can't help but feeling and I'm with you. Like, I find the complexity of Rhett Butler and Scarlett O'Hara's relationship interesting, but it's interesting in like as interesting as, oh my gosh, there's a car on fire on the highway. That sort of interest. It's like just when you think that Scarlett O'Hara has learned a lesson, that she is going to turn herself around and she is going to be someone of not only practical strength but moral, sensible strength, she snatches defeat from the jaws of victory and shows her absolutely unlikable, childish inner self that has learned nothing over 4 hours and many years of my time in movie time. And so at the end, I can't help but walk away saying, that's just desserts. She got it.
Well, no, and I definitely agree with that. I think that she gets everything she deserves, and and I love that Rhett walks out on her finally. I think that's just brilliant. The way that it ends is brilliant. I think that's a strong ending. The fact that she still gets kicked into the teeth at the end,
after 4 hours, she still gets it.
Yeah, I think that's great. You know, the Das Boat reference I think is a really good one, and I think what works there that isn't here is we're watching soldiers. Now, yes, they're Nazis, but we're not seeing them in context of any of the people that they are putting down. All we're seeing is just a very small window in their life of them as soldiers, just trying to fight and make it through these submarine battles that they're having. Here we have a much more epic vision of everything that's going on, and so we see all the slavery. I have a feeling Das Boat would be much harder if we also then see them earlier in the film when they're in town or whatever. You know, I think it would be so much harder to really find a connection to those people, and I think that's the context of this one. Is we see all of these kind of the Uncle Tom type of slaves that these guys have with them, and everything is painted so glossy and happy.
But Andy, the slaves are so happy. All of them are so
love it.
happy and loyal.
Yes.
I find it just remarkable that you are even bringing up such issues.
You know, I'm going to say something, though, about that, because Hattie McDaniel got a lot of flack for playing her role in this film, and she won an Oscar for it as a Best Supporting Actress Oscar, the first African American to win an Oscar. I think there's a lot of talk about her role, and the NAACP kind of was a little unhappy with her as she played this role, and she said, you know, I would rather play a maid than be a maid, and I see her point. I think that's smart, and obviously she ended up having a good career in the film and entertainment business. If you take out the fact that she's really a slave, not a maid, I think that there is actually a very interesting relationship portrayed between her and Scarlett, and I found it very interesting that she's the one that Scarlett ends up kind of consulting with more over the course of the film than her mother, who actually dies. But I mean, even when her mother was around, it was Mammy who was the one who she talked to a lot more. And I really ended up liking their relationship, and that was actually one of the most interesting relationships that I found in the film this go around.
I actually agree with you, and I say that sarcastically, but they were so happy. The interesting thing here is that she established this sort of maternal relationship with Mammy, and it gets to what we're talking about, that if you can move past the fact that this was a slave relationship, if you can do that, then what you see in Hattie McDaniel is a funny, strong, black character actress in an important and pivotal role in the dramatic structure of the film, right?
Absolutely.
And you have to be able to step away from that, and in order to have the appreciation of what she really is able to do in the film. But I think the bigger question, and you had sent the link, Andy, and forgive me, I don't have it up. Do you have the editorial up about I hate Gone with the Wind?
I do, yes.
I think what that is getting to, and I'll let you kind of summarize that, but I think the overall question that these kinds of editorials are getting to is, should we even ask ourselves to step away from that layer of abstraction? Should we allow ourselves to appreciate Gone with the Wind as a work of film art, and let go of its foundational tone-deaf racism?
Right. Yeah, John E. Price over at the Huffington Post had a little blog post on there. Said, yes, you're a racist and a traitor. And it starts with him talking about how he was out jogging and he went past a neighbor's house and realized, even though he's passed it many, many times, this is the first time that he actually noticed that they're flying a Confederate flag in Pennsylvania. And it started this whole, this look into what this means, and I mean, it's like we said at the beginning, this oddly ended up being very timely, the fact that we're talking about this. But yeah, he talks about Gone with the Wind, how it portrays the Civil War, how it portrays these Southern aristocrats, its popularity, the fact that it's an iconic movie, the fact that it was ever made in the first place. He said, Gone with the Wind is Birth of a Nation with less horses. The movie and its position among the American cinematic pantheon has done more to further the ahistoric Lost Cause BS than any other single production, because that's the fundamental problem with the Lost Cause narrative. It's not true. And he goes, has a whole list of all the Lost Cause tinged revisionist talking points, like the Civil War is about economics, not slavery. And then his response, yes, the Civil War was about the economics of slavery. And so it's actually a very funny and insightful read that we can post on our in the show notes. But it's it does make it very just good points about, is this film even one worth looking at and talking about now? And that's why I think it's so interesting looking at a film like Song of the South, that Disney has still, as of yet, not released, because they know that it is just wildly inappropriate the way that Uncle Ben Remus is portrayed in that film. It is very much that kind of Uncle Tom sort of character who, yes, he's singing Zippity Doo Dah and everything, but it's really what's actually going on in their lives is not appropriate. I think that it's probably smart that Disney has not released that. There are ways that you can still track that down if you want to see it. There are films that, I think that it's kind of time to start looking at what films are appropriate to kind of continue just showing regularly, or what do you kind of put aside and say, okay, if you want to go and look at this as a cultural artifact and examine kind of methodically what it's doing wrong and what it's doing right, then I think that's worth talking about. Gone with the Wind, Peter Pan, there are some films out there that it's just like, why are these still so widely pumped into our entertainment world?
Yeah, I think it's questionable, even if you take away the historical resonance of it. It seems like that we should put the film away because the characters are so troublesome. Like, they're not really worth talking about. They're not very likable people, and they're not, their transformations, their cinematic transformations are not that great. They're extremely wealthy people who have trouble dealing with their own wealth and struggle. But I think that you have a great point, which is, maybe this is one of those films that must come with the caveat that says you can't watch this outside of historical context. This is one you need to be able to process.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that there are films out there that just don't, it's not like there is something that gets put out with films. Disney does that with films that show smoking now, like Pinocchio, where they'll have a little public service announcement that plays beforehand about why smoking is bad and stuff. But I don't know if kids really get much out of that when you're watching the movie. This is one of those films where it seems like you really need to kind of set aside and just, if you're going to watch it, you need to be ready to have some conversations about it.
Yeah. Well, so I am assuming that because we haven't hung up the show, that we are going to talk about it in the context of, we're going to talk about it as a film, and we're going to go ahead and let our concerns be hereby noted.
Yes.
And let's go ahead and talk through some of the parts we find most interesting as a film.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So it was a tough one to get made. David O. Selznick originally didn't want it. And when he heard about it, and it was extremely popular, and he heard about it and then discovered that his assistant pitched it to the other side of his production house, and then he decided, okay, we need to go ahead and buy it. And so from there, it took years to get it cast, to get the script written, to get the script cut from a 5.5 hour film to 4 hours. It was extremely difficult to get made. And yet somehow they did.
Yeah, he bought it in July of 1936, I believe, and it was released in December 39. Started production January 39, so it did take a good couple years once he bought it. I mean, there were lots of challenges. This was at that time when there were, part of the reason that 1939 is talked about as such a big year for Hollywood is this was kind of the peak of the studio system. The studios really were cranking out lots of great films. They had a lot of it really was like a factory. They just had all these contracts with actors. They had contracts with crew. They had contracts with directors, writers who were there working for them, cranking these things out, where people were doing insane numbers of films every year. It's just crazy how many films people would just be working on. And these directors like Victor Fleming, George Cukor, Sam Wood, they were kind of ending up jumping back and forth between projects because they were contracted by the studio who kind of put them where they needed to, like the Greek gods moving their little figurines around as needed. And so this was a film where Selznick really wanted to find the right cast and really make sure that he told this story well, because he was in love with this story, and he was going to put a lot of money into it. Selznick International was one of the kind of the smaller studios at the time, and he partnered with MGM. I believe he was married to Louis B. Mayer's daughter, and
Yes.
so he kind of worked with them on this project. They both put in some money. And through them, he ended up getting Clark Gable, although there were a few names getting bandied about. And I believe the deal to get Gable was they, in order to for Gable to come along, he was married and he wanted a divorce so that he could marry Carol Lombard, who he'd fallen in love with. And so he got them to pay him an additional $50,000 that he was able to pay his wife at the time to get the divorce.
I love that story. I love that story.
Those were the days.
I believe they also got, and this is a point I find really interesting financially, that they MGM got 7 years, half of the gross receipts for 7 years of the film's release. There's no home video. Right? So we're talking about 7 years of theatrical release around the world.
Right.
Right? Is that how you understand it? I mean,
that's vaguely how I understand it, although I know that down the line, Selznick ended up having to sell off his share of the rights because he was just, as his own little producer, he was kind of financially strapped and had to sell his rights. So I don't know I don't know if MGM ended up buying the rights back, but somehow, I don't know who has the rights now.
That's a shame. That's a hard signature to
put
down on paper if you're David O. Selznick.
Knowing how much this film has made over its lifetime, it's definitely a very painful decision for him to have had to make.
I just found it more interesting that we're talking about that they were banking on 7 years of revenue off of this film. I'm because I'm so I was not alive. Is it that in 1945 I could still go find Gone with the Wind in a theater?
Well, it's because what it did is
they
initially, I believe it started as a road show where they have the film. I think it actually played several ways. After its premiere in Atlanta, I believe it went on a road show, which is basically a very big kind of production of this movie going around like on the road, and it would go around and come to certain areas and play in those areas. And for the road show version, I believe that Selznick had some. I can't remember if he was doing like almost kind of like a cinemascope sort of thing where he had shot, I think for some scenes, like 3 cameras next to each other where you could see like the fire scene when Atlanta's burning. You've got 3 images next to each other to kind of create this gargantuan fire scene. And so it would go on the road for a very long time, and then it would play in other theaters. So that's my sense is why they settled on 7 years, because they really felt like it would have some life to actually play for quite a while.
That's fascinating.
Because you're right. There's no home video, and people, if they wanted to go see it again, they had to go back to the theater.
Yeah, and so the idea that they had this sort of model of getting the film, doing sort of mini premieres or events like that, I think that's really interesting. I was not aware of that.
Yeah.
Okay. So the film got made. The film got cast. Man, there were a lot of names in contention. I think the most interesting thing about this is just the level of public furor around who is going to play these parts of Rhett and Scarlett.
Well, Margaret Mitchell had written this book that turned into a huge phenomenon. I don't know if it still is, but it was at one point like the best-selling book of all time, sort of thing. It was a very, 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 very popular book. And so, yeah, the people had very specific ideas as to who they wanted. Selznick came up with the great idea of actually having a kind of a public poll of who should play Scarlett. And all these names, I mean, all the big names were all thrown in. And apparently one guy in New Zealand threw in the name Vivien Leigh. That's not how they ended up pulling Vivien Leigh in, but it was just one of those strange coincidences that there's one person out there thinking of her, at least. But yeah, she wasn't even really on the table. She had actually heard about this. She was over in England, and she had heard that they were making this and just decided that she had to be in the part. And so somehow she ended up over there in the U.S. and she met Selznick's brother, who realized that she was probably the perfect person, and he brought her to the burning of Atlanta, the special effects scenes, which they filmed long before the filming actually began. They actually were burning down old studio sets, like the old King Kong gate. They were burning down a couple of the other sets from other films, and they were just they made them to look like Atlanta, whatever. But they burned all that down. They actually, for that scene, they had all 7 Technicolor cameras in existence filming the burning of Atlanta scenes. And while they were there, Selznick's brother actually introduced Vivien Leigh to David O. Selznick, and everything just clicked. He realized this is the perfect Scarlett, and he had her do some reads with other people and everything, and just knew that she was the one.
I think she is a fascinating character, because she was in England doing a show with Laurence Olivier and fell in love with Laurence Olivier, and she had an agent in England that she was apparently happy with, but heard about this whole thing happening, Gone with the Wind, and started working and scheming. She was an incredibly duplicitous person, judging by these reports. She actually went and signed with Myron Selznick, who was an agent here in the United States, without telling her British agent that she was doing it, just so she could, come over here and get close to the Selznick production. And so, it is reported, at least in some of the making of material, one of the reasons that she said she was perfect for the role, and that David O. Selznick eventually said she was perfect for the role, is that, she really ended up doing exactly what Scarlett O'Hara would have done to get her way and sort of weasel her way into the part. Right.
Yeah, she definitely did seem to be kind of the embodiment of Scarlett.
Yeah. And she was. I mean, she was great. She was much better than that. I mean, I spent some time this afternoon watching a bunch of screen tests of the other, lots of other women that they had recorded or shot to do this. And I think she is terrific. And it's a fascinating thing listening to her. She has a natural sort of native British accent, and to hear her speak and then shift into this Southern belle kind of drawl, which is, she came and read for the part, having never really heard a Southern accent. Right. And so it sort of developed over a very short period of time. But I think it sounds really good, and it has become sort of a international staple of what Southern gentle ladies sound like.
Well, and Selznick, I mean, they really worked. I believe he had a really good working relationship with Margaret Mitchell, and she actually put him in touch with a couple people from the South that she knew who actually came on board to help train the actors with their accents and all that. Selznick is notorious for his memos. That was one thing that everybody always talked about with David O. Selznick, whether it's on this one or Hitchcock certainly had his fair share of memos when he was doing Rebecca. there's a memo that Selznick wrote that I think is pretty funny about just right toward the beginning of production with Vivien Leigh. He said, Miss Leigh should report regularly at 9 or 9:30 each morning, work at least 2 hours on her accent, then report for fittings, then report for rehearsals with Mr. Cukor, and for any photographic test that may be necessary. I should like the photographic test to include various experiments with ways of making up her eyebrows, to make them look more natural and more in period, different makeups and experiments with her figure, including, particularly, her bosom.
How'd you like to receive that memo?
I know.
Andy, I'd like you to do more experiments with your bosom. T-shirt.
There you go.
Oh, that's good.
Oh, yes.
All right, so
but,
there is the good
there's
Vivien Leigh,
Vivien.
yes.
Yeah. Tragic life, man. Vivien Leigh. Oof. She really was... I mean, she had a great life with Laurence Olivier, but when she was doing Streetcar Named Desire, it seemed to drive her into madness, really. And aside from her tuberculosis and everything, her manic depression really kicked in and kind of drove her to divorce. And then the tuberculosis got her, and she ended up dying. Very tragic life that she had, but successful. She made a lot of great films.
Yeah, she did burn brightly.
Yes, indeed.
There was no such consternation around the casting of Rhett Butler. It seems like the popular sentiment at the time was Clark Gable is the guy. He's the one you have to find out what you got to do to get him. And so they did, but it didn't seem like, there weren't the hundreds and hundreds of screen tests for Rhett Butler that there were for Scarlett O'Hara. That's my understanding.
No. But he brought a lot to the character. I love the way that he he seems kind of just happy and dismissive about things. There's a wisdom and honesty in his shrewdness and his selfishness that I find myself really drawn to. I like watching him on screen. He's very as much as you don't like some of the things that he's doing as far as the world of the South, I do like him as a character. I find him pretty fun to watch.
He's sort of he tortures me a little bit because, I find that, I love him because he's a scallywag, right? He's like the original Han Solo. You know what I mean?
Right.
And he really is the original Han Solo. Like he was a freelancer. He was what do they call him? He was not in the military, and then he joined the military. He joined the Rebel Alliance,
right.
to become a captain in the Confederate Army and go fight for the rebels. And that, I really liked him. I really liked that sort of renegade vibe. And then he says, I'm going to go sign up. And it's like a head slapping moment. It's like, oh, really? Really? Just when I was getting to like you. But I find it interesting that we have this cultural context where I have that relationship with Rhett Butler and not with Han Solo.
I don't know. They have an awful lot of robot slaves.
Do you see what I'm saying? I think Star Wars, the entire Star Wars saga, really is Gone with the Wind.
That's what I'm saying. All those droids, they're just slaves. Slave labor.
This is it.
Chewbacca.
Oh, we're in trouble.
We're going down a dark road, Pete.
We are. I think we are. Let's go ahead and bring it back. We've been talking for a long time about these two people, and I think we need to start busting out some of our favorite sequences. And I want to tell you mine because you've already opened the door to it, which is the burning of Atlanta, which for me was sort of the central highlight of the film for me. And I find it wonderful because when you see press photos of the picture, you always see the dip, right? The Clark Gable dip of Scarlett O'Hara. That is so how overdone. The when they lean into each other to talk at each other's mouths so close. They talk so close to their mouths, and the camera is right on them, and it's a perfect square. And sometimes it's a silhouette, and sometimes it's not. But in a 4-hour movie, man, that gets played out. And so the sequences that really stuck out to me were the giant set pieces when they start burning stuff and you see the little, the little carriage inserted in front of this giant burning Atlanta, when you see what they had to do, the scale of the destruction when the soldiers start coming back through, and the camera. There's that beautiful crane shot where they lift up and slowly they tilt up, and you see the hundreds and hundreds to thousands of bodies strewn out across the rail yard. Those giant set pieces that you never see in the glorification of Gone with the Wind, the film kind of press material. Those were the sequences that really blew me away, that just really had me engaged in the story, that, as you say, highlighted the fact that this was a world-ending event for the South, that this ended the way their universe sort of rotates. And so I really celebrated the visuals of that sequence, of these sequences.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that was strong. I was also, I have to say, Olivia de Havilland, I kind of had forgotten her a bit in this, but I really liked Melanie. There was something about her honesty, it's almost like her belief in the best of everything that I was really drawn to. I was really touched by, even though I think there were times she knew that Scarlett had a thing for her husband, Ashley. I feel like Melanie always strove to find the best in people, and I was really drawn to most everything that Olivia de Havilland was in. I really liked her, and in particular, I really liked the bit when everything was falling apart, all the men were off at war, and she was at home at Tara with all the other women, and they were, for the first time, having to kind of work and do things. It wasn't all about balls and stuff, but they were out in the cotton field picking cotton, and there was something about just kind of the nature of that scene that kind of it seemed to ground the people a little more, and I found myself kind of drawn to those sorts of scenes.
Oh, I agree with you. I think that's a nice sequence, and that sort of surprised me in the beginning, because you said you kind of had a tough time getting through the middle, and to me that was the middle. So what was it that you had a tough time with?
I shouldn't say a tough time. It's just I didn't remember the middle as well. It's like the beginning and the end are the parts that for whatever reason always stick out to me, and the middle always gets lost in my mental ether. And when the middle hits here, I just kind of like, oh yeah, I forgot about all this stuff, and then we got to go through all this, and it's a 4-hour movie. Of course, there's going to be a lot of stuff here, but for me, it's always like the war starts, and then she's married to Rhett, and their kid dies. It ends. Like I forget that she's had 2 husbands before him, and there's so many other things.
In your version, there's actually a laugh track. It's like a 22-minute serial. That is that really is, and I'm glad you brought up Mellie, because I think you're right. She's sort of the soul anchor of this film, because everybody else is just, they really, some horrible things happen. You bring up the death of their daughter of
Bonnie
Blue, and that's a tough one, because you can tell she's already growing up to be an incredibly spoiled, entitled Southern belle.
Right. Yes, she is.
And so,
yes, she is.
Like, her death is it's a symbolic death of an archetype of the South, right? Like, we have this great new energetic life that represents all the things that these belles were: spoiled, rich, and entitled, sort of Southern royalty. And she is killed on a horse, on a pony, and right. That really, I think, represents, again, this is where your world stops. You can't recreate what you had, and we're just gonna keep sending that message until you get it.
Right. Because tomorrow is another day, Pete.
Okay, so Olivia de Havilland was fantastic. Were there any other key players that you wanted to highlight besides the big ones?
Yeah. Leslie Howard, I think, is the other of the four key players. He's the other one that we haven't mentioned that much, but at playing Ashley, I think he's very much a critical part of the story. And Leslie Howard, fantastic British actor. He didn't want to be in this film. David O. Selznick ended up agreeing to pay him or to give him a producer credit on another film that he was doing called Intermezzo, because Leslie Howard wanted to kind of move into that side of things. And so Leslie Howard ended up as a producer on Intermezzo, which I believe also came out in 1939. And but Leslie Howard, he didn't really want to be a part of it. He never read the book. David O. Selznick kept trying to harangue him to get him to read the book. Leslie Howard, he just didn't click with it completely. And I think what I heard was, he had actually fought in World War I, and he had seen a lot of the stuff going on in war, and just the whole nature of this story. He felt like he knew that dark side of war and didn't want to be a part of that story. And then tragically, he ended up dying during World War II. I think it was I can't remember if he had gone off to fight or what, but he ended up dying in a plane crash. I think he was shot down by enemy guns.
Sad, because he also, you're right, he brings some of the heart to this film, although it's kind of a bruised heart. It's certainly not to the level of Mellie, which is interesting because he ends up with Mellie, but he is the ultimate tease, and really spends 4 hours sort of leading on Scarlett.
He's pretty terrible.
He's really, really terrible about that. And this whole thing, again, talk about a movie that could take place in a high school in 1980. It really is this whole thing. The whole thing takes place about bruised sort of romance. Really not childhood, but childish romance.
It very much is a kind of that
melodrama.
Yeah, very melodramatic sort of story.
Yeah.
But I do like Leslie Howard. I think he's great.
I do too. I like. Let's see. I like everybody in this film. I think generally it's cast really well. Scarlett's beau from George Reeves, Fred Crane. These guys they're funny. They're charismatic. They're incredibly superficial. But I do enjoy the banter. I enjoy kind of the way they parade themselves and preen. The cast of servants, Mammy, Pork, and Prissy, Hattie McDaniel, Oscar Polk, and Butterfly McQueen are all wonderful to watch. They are incredibly talented actors, and I think they also do a great job. What were you going to say? I'm sorry.
I was going to say, just going back to the Tarleton brothers, George Reeves and Fred Crane, something that I do like about this film, in the context of the war, is that it doesn't hold back on just people dying. And it's a constant reminder that during war, people in all walks of life, in any, however they're connected to you, people die. The Tarleton brothers, we hear, both of them ended up getting killed. Scarlett's first husband, he dies of pneumonia that he caught when he was out fighting. It's interesting to me how many people end up dying during war and how it's touching all of these people. And so that was that's what I wanted to say about those two.
Yeah, it's good. I think that's one of the things that you get, the advantage that you get when you actually offer yourself the opportunity to create a 4-hour film.
Oh yeah,
is you get a sense of scope. It's a sense of that kind of connection that you get with, I feel like we used to get them more with the when we had more miniseries. I feel like we don't do a lot of miniseries anymore, like Shogun. That we sort of grew up with. Anyhow. So this is one of those films that it does. I think it really gives you a satisfying sense of scope and scale to the connections, all these relationships.
Thomas Mitchell is another, just a fantastic actor of the time who was very busy. This was one of his 5 films, 5 films that he was in 1939. He was her father. He was Gerald O'Hara. He was also in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. He was also in Only Angels Have Wings. He was also in Stagecoach. He was also in The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Very busy,
Wow.
and he won Best Supporting Actor for Stagecoach, I believe, for his portrayal in that film. So very, very busy man. Fantastic actor. I mean, I always remember him from his role in It's a Wonderful Life, because he was kind of a very critical role in that film, and that's just he's constantly in my head as that role in that film, because it's I don't know, I guess that's just where I first met him.
Yeah. I actually I don't have one of those connections with him, but until now it's Gone with the Wind until about up to about Sunday. And now all I can imagine him in is Gone with the Wind. I can't
That's
even.
funny.
You named all those the other 4 films. I can't even picture him in those films.
I can picture him in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, but Uncle Billy in It's a Wonderful Life. That's how I know him.
I know, but that's not his face. You mentioned that, and I can't see his face. I only see Gerald.
That's funny.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Just other random people, just actors that are worth mentioning. Jane Darwell, who is one of the gossipy old birds.
Mm-hmm.
She goes on to be the bird lady in Mary Poppins, Tuppence a bag.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Totally Tuppence a bag lady.
I know, isn't that funny?
Oh, I did not see that at all. But now, I used to see Gerald when I imagined her, and now I actually see her.
And then Bonnie, who he mentioned, she plays the voice of Faline, the deer in Bambi.
Oh, yeah, I did. I wouldn't have been able to pull that. Not
And
even
one
close.
well, no, I wouldn't either. But the one that I think is, when you know it, it's so easy to pinpoint. The dying soldier that Melanie and Scarlett are talking to when they're helping all the soldiers in the church. Once they start coming home, you never see the soldier. You only hear him talking to them. That guy is done by Cliff Edwards, who played Jiminy Cricket. You go back and watch that scene, and you're like, oh my God, it is totally Jiminy Cricket that they're talking to.
No. That's
Yes,
great.
yes. I know, it's very funny.
Okay. Well, now I need to go watch that.
There you go.
So nobody else on your hot list before we move into some of the other roles?
No other actors.
Mm-hmm.
Just some crew that I think that we should be talking about.
Okay. Do you want to talk at all before we go into deep crew? Talk at all about George Cukor, or
I think that's a good place to start with
yeah.
the crew. Yeah, I think Cukor is a great director. Directed a number of just fantastic films. He was the original director of this film, and there were just issues that he was having. He's a smaller film director. He was, I guess you could classify him as, some people would say, a women's picture director. I think that's kind of a terrible way to describe some of the films, but I know that he's been described as such in the past. Fantastic films, but they're films that aren't as big in scope. And Selznick was getting worried after the first 10 days of filming. They only had about 23 minutes of film that they could use, and so they had talked quite a bit, and Cukor ended up, some say stepped down, some say he was kind of fired. Nobody really knows anymore, but anyway, Cukor left the picture. Vivien Leigh, Olivia de Havilland were very much in love with working with Cukor, and they were very upset when Selznick brought Victor Fleming. He pulled him off of Wizard of Oz and put him on this. And he was very much a man's director, and he and Clark Gable were great friends, which was great for them. But those two women had a really hard time with Fleming, and ended up, I guess, still having secret meetings on the weekends with Cukor just to work through character issues and stuff like that, which is a very interesting thing to hear.
It is interesting, but man, you look at the body of work of Fleming versus Cukor, and you can totally see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right there, Cukor has these wonderful comedic sort of relationship films, and Victor Fleming has Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and Captain's Courageous and Test Pilot, and I mean it's just one after another. Treasure Island. I mean these more sort of rollicking adventure films, and yet my experience with this film is not one of mishandled direction.
No, I mean, what a lot of people say is that Selznick was so hands-on in the making of this film that it really is a good example of the producer really being the one who guided it, where you don't have a sense of any one particular director kind of at the helm. It really does feel like a Selznick body of work, that he really ended up nurturing this all the way through. And I mean, it was a big gamble, so he kind of had to. But Fleming did bring a lot of that energy that was needed to tell kind of the bigger parts of the story. Oh, and then Sam Wood ended up coming on for a couple weeks, because I think after about 2 months of Victor Fleming working on it, there was either a fight or Fleming had a nervous breakdown or something, and he left for 2 weeks, and Sam Wood was brought on to direct, who we talked about recently on King's Row. And then Fleming came back to finish it. But between the three directors, there was there's a lot of shooting. This film, I mean, they shot, what was it, like 500,000 feet of film in the making of this film that they then had to cut down to 20,000 feet. So I mean, that's just insane.
It is stunning. I think you're right the way you phrase this. I think it's fair to look at this as a David O. Selznick picture with a lot of really talented ADs.
Right.
The writing credits, moving the over from the Margaret Mitchell book, who really let go. I mean, she was really hands off. And you know what's funny, though? I was originally trying to characterize her. I wanted to find sort of a modern parallel. And I thought maybe she's kind of a J.K. Rowling, this unknown who writes this book and didn't even think it was going to get published. And it ends up being found, and the notes are all out there. And she gives the notes to a reader, and then suddenly it just goes bananas popular, except for J.K. Rowling is so hands-on and so active.
Right.
It doesn't quite work, but that's sort of the parallel to the growth of popularity of Margaret Mitchell as a star author of the era. She went from zero to really famous really fast.
She sure did, yeah. And then she never wanted a sequel. She wanted, this was how she wanted the story to be. And I know that there was a sequel written eventually and a miniseries made and a musical and all this stuff, but she was very content with the book as it was and nothing else.
So what's your sense of the actual written work?
I mean, I think Sidney Howard came on to write the script. I think he did a solid... I mean, I haven't read the book, so I can't say how he translated it, but from everything I've heard, he did it was a very lengthy job. And then Ben Hecht came on to do some rewrites, and then it just kept going from hand to hand. Oliver H.P. Garrett came on, Joe Swirling, John Van Druten. They all came on... And Selznick was doing rewrites too, and that's one of the reasons Cukor was having trouble, is that the script was going through so many changes that he just didn't feel it was going in the right direction anymore. And when Fleming came on board, he actually said he wanted to go back to the Howard draft that Hecht had done a few rewrites on, and that's the version that ended up getting made. I think that it's a solid script. I mean, I think the character development is good. I mean, it is a long movie, but I do think that the script works in context for what they're trying to do.
I think so too, and I think you're right that because this is such a big, ambitious story, the long script, the long film gives you an opportunity to really take your time and get to know these people. And kind of build a relationship with these people. And I think the pacing works pretty well. And, I told you this was, I've never actually watched it start to finish. And I can say that goes unbroken. I wasn't able to get through it, but I only broke once. I made it through 2.5 hours one night and then did the last hour and a half the next night. And it felt like a whole unified piece. It did not feel like a film the kind of film that we've talked about that has so many hands in it is just a big disjointed mess. It felt like a singular narrative spectacle. I really, on that front, I think it works really well.
Yeah, I agree. And for 125 days of filming, I think they managed to kind of pull it all together nicely.
And Sidney Howard was not an easy writer to work with. He wanted to write from his farm exclusively, and was really frustrated with kind of with Selznick's Selznick, like it's an apostrophe,
like he's Irish,
with Selznick's demands, and I think he made one trip to California to actually work on this thing, but for the rest of it, he wanted to work only from his farm in Massachusetts, and that was very frustrating for Selznick. I think that's what originally brought him, caused him to look at other writers to get involved.
Right.
But again, you're right that it is essentially the Howard draft we're watching.
And sadly, Howard died while it was still being edited. He had an accident on his tractor in August, a few months before the film came out.
So, see, farms.
Stay away.
Mm-hmm. Let this be a lesson.
That's just terrible. Oh, man.
Okay, back to the other credits.
I think a hugely, hugely important one to talk about is William Cameron Menzies, who was the production designer on this and designed the color palette of the entire film all the way through, had tons of boards drawn up to really try to make sure that they hit all the right tones for every scene. The color in this, especially, I mean, I'm assuming that you watched the most recently restored version that was restored, the 3-strip Technicolor restoration process that they do to take these 3 images and blend the colors so beautifully. I mean, it was a stunning, stunning film to watch. I just was, dumbfounded constantly by just the level of detail I was seeing and the way that they blended the colors in some of the scenes and the sky. I mean, everything in it just was just gorgeous to look at. Whether it's the mansion when it's all decrepit, falling apart, or when it's in its glory, it's all gorgeous.
Blues and reds, baby. Blues and reds. Every frame is such a... You know what it reminded me of? Are you ready?
Tell me.
Fury Road.
There you go.
Right?
That's right.
So I took... I as I was watching, I was taking a bunch of screenshots of it so that I could, do whatever images that I'm going to do on my stuff for this film this week. And I took more than I normally do, which is like 1 or 2. I took like 60. And I'm looking at them in my Photos app here, and I zoom them way out so that I'm looking at just little thumbnails. And it matches the Fury Road palette. Like you look at it side by side, you wouldn't be able to tell which film it is. It's just this beautiful set of deep, rich blues, reds, and this sort of red-orange kind of yellow. But it is a very consistent color palette, and it just works. It works really well. Wonderfully mature palette.
Yeah, and he was really on this as kind of the second unit director, and really helped guide a lot of the way that a lot of those sorts of scenes, like the burning of Atlanta, like making sure those were done the way they needed to be. So incredible sense of color in this film that he put together. So kudos to him, big time. And he went on to produce and direct some of his own stuff too. I mean, stuff that I haven't seen, but I really want to, like Invaders from Mars, H.G. Wells' Things to Come, things like that I just, I'm sure are silly, but I want to check them out now.
Yeah. Beautiful. And, he also gets credit for taking, for building these sort of fantasy palace plantations too, the Wilkes Place and Tara. These iconic locations, taking them and making them bigger and more opulent than they would have been at the time. I think that's to his credit.
And I think he worked well with Jack Cosgrove, the next person on my list, who was the effects person on this film. The visual effects that they used to create this world. You watch a film from 1939, especially a film that takes place in the Civil War era, you're not thinking of special effects that often, but you see some of these shots and then you watch some of the making of as to how they did the special photographic effects, and you see how they, like the matte paintings that they created, like when Mammy and the other slaves are going up to their new mansion in Atlanta. That mansion is actually Selznick's studio, and then you see what it looks like, a frame of what it looked like before they treated it, and then you see, like, with the matte painting that they did on it to actually make it look like it's a totally different mansion in a totally different time period. Mm-hmm. It's amazing, and all the different work that he did, combining shots and rear screen projection. Jack Cosgrove, we don't talk about a lot of effects, like I said, in these older films, but he deserves major kudos for what he brought to the art form.
Yes, he does. When are we going to talk about Max Steiner?
He's coming up.
Okay, I'll hold off then.
Okay. Walter Plunkett did the costumes. I don't really have a lot to say other than, wow, great costumes. Just lots of detail. This is the level, it's like the Lord of the Rings level of detail that these people went into making just like full-fledged outfits. I think that they all look great.
Hey, great costumes.
Good job, Walter.
Okay.
And Max Steiner.
Max Steiner. Get ready, Andy. Are you ready?
I don't know. Am I?
Did you like this? Did you like this score?
I do. I like the main theme in particular, the Terra's theme.
Yeah.
Yes.
I do too. I agree with you. I'm excited when we agree, because I think the last several I haven't liked as much as you have, and this one I was feeling very proud because I thought you would like this one, and I like it too. I like more than Terra's theme. I actually quite enjoyed the score. I think it's he does some lovely work. He's an Austrian composer, which I find it. I think there is a sense of like of European kind of Hollywood grunge in his orchestrations. You know, it feels like a European sort of symphony to me, and so I really like that. I think it works well with the southern gestalt that is on screen.
Well, and he tapped into a lot of music that was played at the time in the Civil War era. Mm-hmm. And there's songs, like you hear those sorts of songs blended through the score all through. And I think that was a very smart way to kind of tie this music to that era.
Right. It felt like it's like one big mashup.
Right.
It was good. I enjoyed it. I quite enjoyed it.
This was one of 13 films that he scored in 1939.
Goodness.
Yes, very, very busy man. Very busy man.
That's crazy.
Yeah, he's an incredible composer. You go back to some of the stuff that he did at the beginning. I mean, King Kong, 1933, really a lot of composers consider that kind of the foundation for the modern score and what it would bring to, how it would work in the film and what it would bring to the story. And Steiner was kind of key in that. And so, yeah, he's a lot of strength in Steiner's scores, and definitely in particular here.
Yeah, absolutely.
The last name I have on my list to talk about is Yakima Canutt.
Well, of course. How could we not talk about old Yakima?
Yakima or Canutt, maybe. Yeah,
I don't know who Yakima Canutt is. Oh, wait. Okay. I found Yakima.
He's stunts. This is something that I figured that he's worth bringing up because we posted on Facebook earlier in the week. Because the stunt society is really pushing every year, trying to get an Oscar category for best stunt work, which I think is a brilliant idea. I mean, stunts are so critical to filmmaking these days. And there is an incredible level of artistry in what they do. It's not just a technical jump off that horse and land on that pad sort of thing.
Right.
And so I think, looking back at what these guys are doing back in 1939, I mean, Yakima was doing a lot of great stunt work back there for Clark Gable. And I mean, he was the one, I think, who doubled for Gable during the burning of Atlanta, riding in the stagecoach there and stuff like that. So, I just wanted to throw him out there and say kudos, Yakima. Great work. He's another one of those people. You look at the credits that he did just in 1939, and it's probably at least 20 films. So
nice. Good on you, Yakima.
Indeed.
Mm-hmm. How'd you do on numbers?
Good.
You want to talk about it?
Sure. Yeah, you bet.
Okay.
This film, as much as Selznick was trying to keep the budget at, I think, $3 million, it did go over. It ended up at $3.9 million is what I found for the production budget. Adjusted to today's dollars, that's about $65.3 million for the budget. So, I mean, for a 4-hour epic, that's pretty good, I would say. This film ended up grossing domestically. This is interesting because the people who track this film, I think, are very meticulous in tracking it, all of its re-releases that it's had over the years, because this film basically is in the number one slot on our list right now because it's made so much money. Domestically, it grossed $200,276,459. Internationally, $201.5 million. For a total of $401 million, almost $402 million. Adjusted, that's about $6.7 billion adjusted total gross.
What's the spread there between 1 and 2 on our list?
The Exorcist is number 2, and that's at $2.1 billion.
Wow.
So it's a very hefty spread. For a 4-hour movie, even its adjusted gross per finished minute is still healthy at $28 million per finished minute, and The Exorcist is at $17 million. So
that's
it's
amazing.
So that was the adjusted gross. The adjusted profit is pretty close to that too. Yeah, it's only second on our list for the adjusted profit to cost. We talked about Mad Max being number 1. And because the amount of money it made, it's 500 times what its budget was. This one made 100 times its budget, and nothing else even comes close to those two.
Wow. Well, it is a beautiful film that is really not a good exercise to watch. How's that?
It's yeah. I mean, this is a film that there are always going to be people who love this film.
Yeah.
I just think that it has the type of storytelling that can draw some people in. It's if you get past all the rest of it, or you're just not paying attention to all the slavery and everything else that we talked about earlier, there are always going to be people who will be able to just get past that and watch this film. But in context of modern society and everything going on today, it is a much more difficult film to watch.
I think that's the lesson for me, was that, maybe before last week, before just the absolute tragedy in the church last week, I feel like I may have been able to watch this film and think, it's a fable, whatever. That's fine. It's fantasy. It's a romance. Let it go. I take the existence of the film more seriously, today than I did last week. And so I feel like it's important to appreciate the amazing amount of work that these people put into creating this amazing film. And also to say that we may have outlived its usefulness to be able to watch it as a bit of escapist media without having a conversation about what it represents.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we should probably rank it.
Let's do it.
You should head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel, and you should see if our stack rankings of our very favorite films line up with your stack rankings of your very favorite films. And let's just see. I don't know. I think I can appreciate this film and still not really want to watch it all that many more times in my life. So I'm curious to see where this goes.
It is very long, so it's not one that I will put on very often.
All right. Let's do it.
Let's see. All right. Gone with the Wind or The Road Warrior?
The Road Warrior.
I think we can both safely say The Road Warrior. Gone with the Wind or Taxi Driver?
I am going to...
You say it, Pete.
I'm going to say Taxi Driver. Taxi Driver.
Oh, there you go. There you go. I will say Taxi Driver also. But I love Taxi Driver. Gone with the Wind or Major League?
Major League.
I would say Gone with the Wind just for the actual cinematic, the quality of the film. I think it's an incredibly strong film. I still have to pick Major League though.
But yeah, you have to pick Major League.
I would pick Gone with the Wind if it weren't for.
Oh, I know.
I don't know. Yeah.
I know.
Gone with the Wind or The Blob?
The Blob.
Really?
You want to do it? Come on.
I'm gonna say Gone with the Wind. I do think it's far superior to The Blob. I mean, I know that's got all those problems with it, but there's so much quality.
Swanky theme song.
It does have a swanky theme song. Yes, it does.
I'll give it to you because I'm on the record of having picked the Blob already, so I feel like my conscience is clear.
Gone with the Wind. That's one way to do it. Gone with the Wind or Murder by Death. I'm going to do Gone with the Wind at this one. I just had so many problems with everything in Murder by Death.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting comparison too. But I will actually do Murder by Death on this one. I think it's an interesting comparison given how uncomfortable I was with some of the racial stereotypes, the racist stereotypes in Murder by Death. But I had less problem with Murder by Death than I did with Gone with the Wind.
Well, we'll have
I'm gonna do this one with you. We're gonna have to fight this one out.
Okay, ready?
I am.
One, two, three.
Rock.
Paper.
Okay. All right. You win this one.
I win this round, Mr. Nelson. Gone with the Wind or Bull Durham?
Man. Bull Durham.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I tell you, I can appreciate Gone with the Wind and still not rank it higher than most of the movies on our list.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I totally see where you're coming from. I'll pick Bull Durham. I'll go with Bull Durham on this one with you. Gone with the Wind or Say Anything? I'd say Say Anything.
Yeah.
Gone with the Wind or Labor Day? Everybody's favorite, particularly Ben Lott's.
This was the hit James Vanderbeek vehicle.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. I'm picking Gone with the Wind.
I'm picking Gone with the Wind.
All right, 172 out of 190.
All right.
You know, I think that's a fair spot for this to end up in. I think that we can acknowledge that there's a lot of cinematic, technical accomplishments in the film. There's a lot of acting accomplishments in this film. I mean, it did well at the Oscars. This is a very accomplished film. It's just unfortunately just incredibly problematic, and it's just so much harder to watch now.
It is. I find it really. It's when you look at it for what it really is as a representation of the period. It's culturally repellent. And I have a tough time. I had a tough time, having civil conversations with my great-grandmother, may she rest in peace, for very similar reasons. So,
I hear you.
She ranked pretty low on my flick chart list of grandmothers. That's horrible.
On that note,
Gramchart.com.
Very short list.
See if your list of favorite grandmothers lines up with my list of favorite grandmothers. Andy, go. Okay. So where do we go from here? Please make it easier on us next week, Andy.
We're going to be going in for a light Russian comedy, Ninotchka. This is the film billed as Greta Garbo Finally Smiles. So we've got a little bit more lighter fare next week. It should be a fun watch. I've never seen it before, so I'm looking forward to checking it out and easing up on all of the difficulties of this week's watch.
Me too. Until then, I'm going to go to bed.
I'm going to go watch this in reverse and see if it has any secret messages. By CJC, Watches, Reads, and Reviews.
Oh.
CJC says, overly long tale of a selfish, bigoted airhead. This story is offensive. Happy slaves singing in the field. Quittin' time, quittin' time. A totally selfish, self-absorbed, creepy airhead, Miss Scarlet, and her complete lack of regard for any human being. This movie is offensive in its sick portrayal of the Southern pre-Civil War South. 0 stars.
Oh, 0.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yes, and then the interesting thing about CJC is a lot of people left comments, and CJC just continues to reply, should I even care what you think? LOL. Who cares what you think? Your opinion is worthless.
Wow.
Clearly a person who just wants to throw their opinion out there and not actually get into a dialogue about it.
I've got one from a customer titled Sucked. Quite possibly the most overrated movie of all time. Who wants to spend 5 hours listening to a bunch of spoiled racist brats? I'd rather slap Scarlett than kiss her. If this is what the old South was really like, then thank God those damn Yankees won. I'd have marched with General Sherman any time. Wow, opinionated.
Yeah, there you go.
Sherman, they sure paint him as a pretty dark guy.
Yes, they do.
In the movie.
Yes, they do. Oh, my goodness.
Oh, well, there you go. Thanks, Amazon. Always a gift of perspective.
It is hard to believe we have been having in-depth conversations about movies since 2011.
You are telling me. Producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Just visit thenextreel.com/originals. Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
Season 5 had some great adaptations, like our Meryl Streep Oscar-nominated performances series. We covered adaptations like Kramer vs. Kramer, Sophie's Choice, and The French Lieutenant's Woman.
It's a real Sophie's Choice between those books. You see what I did there?
Yeah. And I don't think it's quite at the level of a real Sophie's Choice.
We also did Snowpiercer for our Bong Joon-ho series, adapted from the French graphic novel Le Transpersonnage. Man, I love that movie.
We had our two-part 1939 series that included adaptations like Gone with the Wind, Ninotchka, The Women, and The Hound of the Baskervilles.
A number of those 1939 movies, like Goodbye, Mr. Chips, also tied into our recent 1940 Academy Award Best Picture nominee series.
Our naughty children horror series had creepy adaptations like The Bad Seed, Village of the Damned, The Innocents, and Children of the Corn.
For our Hayao Miyazaki series, we talked about his take on Lupin III with The Castle of Cagliostro, plus his own The Wind Rises.
Some great listener choice picks too, Viridiana and The Great Escape.
And for our David Mamet Wright series, The Verdict, The Untouchables, and Glengarry Glen Ross.
Plus, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang from our Shane Black series, adapted from Brett Halliday's novel, Bodies Are Where You Find Them.
Dive into the sources for all of these at thenextreel.com/originals.
Every book you buy helps support the show. Check out thenextreel.com/originals today and find your next read.